Welcome to Sideline Sanity with Michele Tafoya. I'm Michele Tafoya. We are sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There's never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Check them out. LegacyPMInvestments.com. LegacyPMInvestments.com. Coming up next, Kennedy.
For nearly 3 decades, she's reported the action from the sidelines. She started very young. She's covered the NBA, NFL, Olympics, and the college football and basketball national championships. And now, during these insane times in our world, Michele Tafoya thinks we need a serious dose of sanity. This is Sideline Sanity with your host, one of the sanest people on planet Earth, Michele Tafoya.
So, Lisa Kennedy Montgomery was her name at birth. Everyone knows her now and has forever as Kennedy. I almost called you Lisa. Oh
That's
my gosh.
Okay. You can call me Lisa. A lot of people do.
Who calls you Lisa?
Doctors, my family, like mail carriers, anyone who sees the name. There are people in the building who go, "Hello, Lisa." And I'm like, "Hello, how are you?"
All right. You have 2 brothers, right?
Yes.
Do they have interesting middle names as well? Because I think Kennedy's interesting.
No, and my oldest brother is really mad about it because his name was supposed to be Kennedy. That was supposed to be his first name, and they didn't give it to him. And he's like, "If that were my name, I would have been on MTV." It's like, no, you wouldn't have.
Well, I want to get to that. You were born in Indianapolis, raised in Lake Oswego, Oregon, went to UCLA.
Woo, go Bruins.
And at the ripe old age of 19, ended up as a DJ on K-Rock, which was a massively huge station. I remember it when I was out there in LA. And how in the heck did that happen?
I was thinking about this the other day because it was really about finding the balance between being persistent and being annoying. I was an intern at a radio station because I was taking a communications class at Pasadena City College for extra credit. And after I started interning at the radio station, it was K-Rock in the 90s. It was so much fun. It was like the end of the Manchester era and the beginning of grunge. So it was this incredible intersection where alternative radio and alternative music were just getting massive traction across the country. So it was a really exciting place to work, even though my internship was unpaid. And because it was unpaid, I was getting a lot of pressure from my parents to get a job and become financially independent. So we had a really young program director who is a true visionary. And he was one of the rare programmers who did everything through intuition. And he told me a fantastic story about how he and the music director used to go to different record stores in LA. And they found this one, and the cover of it they thought looked really interesting. And the guy looked amazing. And they're like, let's listen to this and see if we like it. So they took it back to the station. They listened to it. And they're like, you know what? This song is really great. I think our listeners would like this. And they didn't have any record executives or A&R people working them, or promotions people rather, working them on this record. They just liked the way it looked, listened to it, liked the way it sounded, and it was Seal. Crazy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so there were so many instances like that where there were no radio rules that applied to alternative. And so because of that, it was a very creative environment, and our program director was always open to new and funny ideas. And he had a really great way of understanding and appreciating authenticity. So I used to go into his office all the time as an 18-year-old intern and be like, "Andy, you should totally put me on the air. I would have so much fun." And, he's like, "Do you have any on-air experience?" I'm like, "Well, not yet, but that's where you come in." So one day he called my bluff and he said, "Okay, I'm going to give you a 2-night audition on the overnight from 1 to 5:30 in the morning. And if you can pass that, then I will hire you as a part-time overnight DJ." And I did. And I didn't have an FCC license. I'd applied for one, and it's just a piece of paper that hadn't come in yet. So the music director was kind enough to stay up with me for 2 nights and sort of coach me through the process.
Oh my gosh, that is a major commitment. I can't really imagine doing that, but he must have really liked you, Kennedy. There must have been something about you they saw.
But I will tell you this. He also found And K Rock was a launching pad for Adam Carolla,
Yep.
Carson Daly, and Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah.
So it had a way of recognizing people who hadn't yet had a break but had something there, and it was our job to kind of refine what we were working with in the process.
Well, it's interesting too because all of you have something in common. You're all really creative, funny people, and I think that you all were right for that kind of format at that time with K Rock. If people aren't familiar with it, it was one of the all-time great radio stations in Los Angeles. I interned at KLOS and
Awesome.
up north before that. You and I have a lot in common that way. Your direction went very different from mine. I waited a long time before I had the guts to go pursue a TV career. But so then when did MTV recognize you, or is that how it happened, or did you again annoy them?
So the executive producer of the morning show at the time was the talent manager. And so she was managing Adam Sandler at the time. She had managed Ellen and a bunch of other comics. So she had a relationship with Lisa Berger, who was a talent executive at MTV. And she introduced me to Lisa Berger, and I met with her, and she was like, I think there's something here. You've got kind of a cool look and an interesting personality. I hear you on Kevin and Bean, which was the morning show at
Yep.
K-Rock for 35 years.
Yeah.
So she kind of put me in her back pocket. And then Andy, my program director at K-Rock, got hired at MTV because, word of his promotions and creativity made its way to MTV. And they're like, that's exactly what we're looking for.
Right.
So they plucked him from radio to music television. And then he had been there for like 5 months, and he asked if I wanted to do a VJ audition. And then he and Lisa Berger, who was the executive that I had met with the spring of 1992, they got together and pushed Judy McGrath, who was the president at the time, to hire me, and she did.
And the rest, as they say, is history. I mean, it's always these really interesting, I think, intersections of timing. They always say luck is where preparation meets opportunity. I'm a big believer in that as well. And obviously, you had prepared yourself, but it's remarkable to have gone from this music head, which you still are, and you are just known for that. But then these various transitions. And here you are, you find yourself at Fox Business News and Fox News Channel as a self-proclaimed libertarian. And how much of a difference is this new life for you? And it's not new. You've been there a while. Don't get me wrong. I don't mean it that way. I mean the jump from music to more politics, current events, world events, business, etc. How was that? What did that take?
So I was always into politics in high school. I loved politics and I loved music. I developed an obsession with Dan Quayle in high school. I was a member of the Teen Republicans in Oregon, and he came to speak to
That must have been a small club. Was it small?
It was small. It was really fun though, because I liked it because I didn't even know really the difference between Republicans and Democrats
You
too well
didn't.
at that point in high school. I
Okay.
just knew that when I told my super lefty teachers that I didn't like that I was a Republican, they would get so mad. And I remember one teacher pulling me aside and being like, "How dare you? We are fighting against this establishment and you are laying down in front of their tanks." This
Oh,
was the late 80s after Tiananmen Square. And I was like,
yeah.
stop being so dramatic. Like, the fact that you're so dramatic and emotional makes me want to investigate the other side. And so for a long time, I was a Republican. And
Right.
at MTV, I talked a lot about politics. When I interviewed bands, I would ask them about their politics. I would challenge bands like Rage Against the Machine
Yeah.
about their ultra leftist socialistic tendencies, and no one pushed back on them. So a lot of people didn't like being challenged, but it was a climate that was much more curious, and
Yeah.
like it was kind of a cute little oddity that there was a Republican at MTV. How wacky! Because Bill Clinton, he ascended to power in
Yeah.
1992, the entire time that I was at MTV. So everyone felt pretty comfortable that the Democrat establishment was secure. And, by and large, they let me do and say what I wanted, although my final contract cycle, MTV put in there that I was not allowed to make any appearances to talk about politics on any medium without written approval. And they would conveniently, when I would get a request for something, they would conveniently not give me disapproval until 2 days after the event.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting how that goes. I did mention you're with Fox Business Network, and you also contribute at Fox News Channel. So I'm being told I forgot business, but no, I did not. I said
No, you
Fox
didn't. You said
Business.
business. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
And thank you to the voices in my head who are telling me otherwise. They are actual voices, by the way. Okay. So I have to ask you now, go back to Rage Against the Machine. So you push them on this, and how do they react?
It was interesting because they had their bubble and their propaganda that they clung very tightly to, and all it takes is a couple rounds of yes, but why? And
Right.
at some point, that starts to fall apart.
Mhm.
Because what if I don't want my tax dollars to go to this?
Right.
What if I believe that individuals should be allowed more freedom? Why is that bad?
Right.
And after a while, they just get really frustrated, and they're like, "You're lame. You're lame. I'm out of here."
Did they do that?
Yeah.
Oh, and then did they get up and leave?
No, they didn't leave.
Oh,
They waited till the
okay.
interview was over.
Okay. Oh, geez. Well, isn't that always the answer when someone disagrees, but they run out of arguments? Just call you a name. In this case, lame. Which, by the way, at my kids' school, you're not allowed to call people lame.
Oh, of course. I'm sure there's a laundry list of things you're not allowed to say.
Yep.
We should just put duct tape over the kids' faces. Oh, wait, we did. We masked them for 2 years.
Yes, we did. Fortunately, I'm knocking on wood here. That's the end of that at this particular school, because everyone's so much happier. It's like I was in the airport and on airplanes, and it's a happy place to be again. The airport and the airplanes were so depressing, and people were so angry, and they were so frustrated, and they were being, yapped at and pointed out, and fights started over these stupid masks. Since this thing ended, you see smiling. You
Mhm.
see people that greet one another. I was sitting across the aisle from this gentleman, and he didn't have a mask. I didn't have my mask. Some people did. That's fine. Friedman, we're not going to, go have violence against these people, as he suggested. But anyway, about 3 passengers got on and said, "Hey, Bill, how you doing?" Walk by. "Hey, Bill, how you doing?" Walk by. "Hey, Bill." And I turned to him and I said, "Hey, Bill, do you think they would have noticed you had your mask on?" He said, "No way." So, I mean, it lightened everything. You know what I mean? Have you experienced that yet? That difference?
Yes, and I flew throughout the entire pandemic. I
Yeah, I
got
did too.
COVID pretty early, and yes, you had to work. I mean,
Yeah.
they didn't stop what you were doing, so
No.
you were flying every week. So I got COVID pretty early in March of 2020, and got pretty sick. So I felt like I had adequate protection
Yeah.
after that, and with masks on planes, and I fly United, and they were very, very adamant about how they were working with Cleveland Clinic to clean the planes. I'm like, why weren't you doing this before? And please continue doing this after the pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people were always on edge. Like, people were hyper polite because they didn't want to be the cause of one of these mask battles. And
Yeah.
I saw a woman escorted off a plane, and of course I followed her and LAPD off the plane because I wanted to hear what she was saying. She was like, "I have my mask on now. What's the problem?" And
Oh,
so, like,
dear.
the mask Karens on both sides have become so annoying. It's like, I get it. You all want to die on the hill, either the anti-masking hill or the pro-masking hill. Just let me walk through the valley of the shadow of Fauci on my own terms, making my own decisions.
Amen, sister. And that from someone who went through COVID. Did your daughters get it?
Yes. So
Oh, they did.
I got it again. We all got it at Christmas. So our Christmas dinner was hysterical because we're all just pale, like trying so hard to eat pumpkin soup and ham. And we're just like, ugh. And my 16-year-old's like, I don't feel good. Can I please go lay down? And it's like, yes, you have opened your gifts. You have done your perfunctory Christmas duties. You may
Oh
rest.
gosh. It's going to be such an interesting chapter in history. I think about my mom, my parents who grew up during the Depression and, World War II and then experienced the whole Vietnam thing and all this. And we're going to have our COVID. I mean, the COVID thing is just going to be this huge, like, chunk of the
Mhm.
history books, how we failed, how we succeeded, all of that.
Yeah.
But it really has changed life in America in a myriad of ways. But let's get to something you just mentioned, and that is children. You have
Mm.
two girls. I have a boy and a girl. We're both in the teenage years now. It's so much fun.
Woo!
Yoo-hoo! Um, Roe v. Wade could get overturned here this summer. First of all, the leak of the Supreme Court, a draft of the brief or of the decision, a draft decision that was leaked by obviously someone very close to these judges, right? Justice Alito. What bothers you more, the leak or what might happen here?
The leak as pretext for uh protesting and potentially violence.
Mhm.
And, talking about the leak as though that is a settled decision, I think is
Right.
very irresponsible. And there's a reason that the Supreme Court has operated in an insular way where the clerks and justices can all trust one another because there has to be an open dialogue. Anyone who watches the court or who has worked as a clerk will tell you it's a very dynamic process, and there's a lot that goes into settling a decision. And they take votes right after oral argument, and obviously they go back and they draft various opinions, and then they vote again, and they go back, and they'll have multiple votes on things. And this is not settled, and we shouldn't treat it as such. But it's an interesting thing because a celebration of abortion is not the appropriate response.
Yeah.
It's okay to say, and as a libertarian, I agree with this. This is an incredibly personal decision
Yeah.
between a woman and her doctor early in pregnancy. There's
Mhm.
no doubt about that. I mean, I personally have an issue when you get up to 15 weeks,
Yeah.
when you get up to 20 weeks, then I think that you should call it something else because it is no longer terminating a pregnancy for whatever reason. And we have the kind of technology now that genetically what is going on
Yeah.
with your baby, like long before you reach that point. So there's tremendous personal responsibility that we as women have to employ before it gets to the point where it's in the legislature and it's in the courts. But I think that it's a violation of moral law to be championing abortion in and of itself. It's a very sad thing,
It
and it,
is.
it shouldn't be glorified as a rite of passage
Right.
for people. So people who are chanting, God bless abortion and all that,
Yeah.
I think there's something wrong with them. And as a society, we have lost the plot.
It's interesting. I have a friend that I've been talking to about this topic, and she said, I don't think we're ever going to agree on this. And I said, well, I'm just going to throw it out there. There's the moment you conceive, and then there's the moment of birth. Isn't somewhere along that timeline an appropriate moment to say, this is no longer, this is a viable child? And that's what, in fact, even in Roe, it was 3 months. It was the first trimester, fine, legal. Beyond that, now we're dealing with, and this was based on, the lack of technology back in 1972, 73. We couldn't see these pictures the way that we can now. I've had other people, a good friend who is a lifelong liberal, say, you know what? I've seen premature babies born at 5 months and they are now 20 years old walking the earth. And I think that a 5-month old preemie can survive. And therefore, I think there should be a point, as you mentioned, on the timeline where we can all agree, not maybe easily, but if we do the hard work, come up with some sort of moment or some sort of range, right?
or
What?
or a series of moments because there is a range. And I know there are people for religious reasons, and I have a great deal of respect for people who've come to this conclusion logically,
Right.
that there is a zero tolerance for abortion at any point. I don't think we are still there as a society. And I
I don't
think
either.
that's when, you know, a woman has to do a very thorough self-examination, and she has to ask herself about the ramifications and what she is doing and what life is. She has to ask herself that. And then, you can talk to your doctor. But demonizing someone for that self-examination and for that conversation is also very counterproductive, and it doesn't convince anyone of your argument. And I hope we get to a place where we do have a great and wonderful respect for human life. I had a wonderful conversation with Jessica Tarlov, and since she's had her baby, she has an infant. She sees human beings differently, and you
Yeah.
do. You see every person you meet, no matter what kind of a hard time they're having, no matter what kind of a struggle mentally, physically, emotionally, you see them as someone's kid and an extension of your child, because
Yeah.
something has been activated in you that loves in a way that was deeper than anything you could ever imagine.
There's no question about that. And my daughter, whom we adopted from Bogota, Colombia, even this child who was a gift to us, I look at it as a gift, has just lit up our lives and changed our view of her mother for having the courage to deliver her. And I'm not
Mm.
suggesting that everyone has to do that, but she did. And I just want to meet her someday and embrace her and tell her about the gift she gave me. At the same time, had she made the other decision, had she said, I just can't do this, that would be up to her. But I do think it's so, do you think it's as polarizing as it used to be, Kennedy? Because it sure seems a little closer to 50-50 now, pro-life, pro-choice.
I think that in peacetime, it was very polarizing because it seemed like the most urgent issue that we ever could have imagined. But now, after a pandemic, with war in Ukraine, with inflation and a recession on the horizon, people aren't talking about it as much. And there's almost a resignation that if Roe v. Wade is overturned, that people who are in their reproductive years, maybe they don't want to live in a state that has abortion restrictions, and maybe if they are making a choice about moving somewhere, they can move somewhere else. So
Uh,
those are the choices that people will make, and California is always going to be a high tax state that is a haven for abortion.
yes. And again, it's important to remind people that if Roe gets overturned, that doesn't mean abortion is banned. That's not what it means. It means that the question now goes back to the states, and frankly, that's where a lot of people think it should be. Um, I am pro-choice. I do believe it's up to a woman to make that decision. I also am pro contraception. I think we can also think a little bit about our circumstances, as we head into these other decisions that may lead to a pregnancy. But accidents always happen, right? There are those cases. But even back in the Clinton years, it was legal, safe, and rare. That was the accepted sort of Democrat standard. And I don't know. I don't know if we're just hearing the loudest voices right now, and that's all we're hearing, and if the kind of more moderate voices like yours are just getting lost in the cacophony of it all.
Yeah, because it's like, I'm pro life, I'm pro choice. And it's like, I'm pro choice on pretty much anything.
Yeah, yeah,
But at some point, you have to be honest with yourself,
yeah.
and you have to know, like, this isn't good. It's not good for me. It's not good for my soul. I hope more people put themselves in a position where they use contraception and they exhibit better choices and they exhibit more personal responsibility, so they don't have to get to that point. I mean, also, we didn't have plan B
Right,
when we were adolescents, when we
right.
were in college. And and I talk to my daughters about this all the time, like, you have so many more alternatives and options.
Yeah.
And I always tell them, do not have unprotected sex, because boys have dirty wieners.
Yeah. And on that note, quick break, more with Kennedy after this. You know, folks, since November of last year, the stock market has plummeted, but gold has been on the rise. Gas prices, well, they're insane. The stock market is extremely vulnerable. Inflation is even worse than it was a year ago. And now we have a war with Russia and Ukraine that could involve the rest of the world. The markets don't like instability, but the good news is you have options. Gold prices are rising as investors turn to gold for protection. Gold provides a hedge against inflation and protects against a weakening dollar. Legacy Precious Metals is the only company I trust for investing in gold and silver. Call Legacy Precious Metals today. Be proactive while there is still time, because remember 2008? Those who invested in gold saw huge gains while others lost their retirements. Legacy Precious Metals can advise you on all your options for investing in gold and silver. You can speak to an IRA expert at Legacy Precious Metals at 866-528-1903, 866-528-1903, or download their free investor's guide at legacypminvestments.com, legacypminvestments.com. Kennedy, let's talk. Kennedy was is it after John F. Kennedy that you were named?
Yeah, I have
Okay.
my parents were Camelot Democrats for sure.
Okay. What are
And
they
my
now?
grandmother, my father is deceased, but
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
no, me too. I miss him every day. But he was a capitalist, so we even put that on his headstone. It says father, grandfather, capitalist.
Love it.
So he always voted with the market and whoever would bolster the market. My parents, my mom and stepdad, I would consider them conservative Democrats. They're
Okay.
Catholic, and they love people. They think that government should support people, especially those who cannot support themselves. And, I have a great deal of respect for that, even as a limited government person.
Right. Um, when we talk about Democrats and presidents, we naturally come to the topic of Joe Biden.
Oh,
It's so much worse than I ever expected it to be. I felt like that election obviously was going to go either way, and clearly it came down to going either way. We got Biden, and I said, okay, well, let's see what he does. And I heard people telling me, well, he's got empathy. We need empathy in the White House. He's normal. Okay. We are so much worse off right now than we were the day he took office. To me, it started with the cancellation of the Keystone Pipeline. That's just one of many decisions he made very quickly, but it was an indication that we were going to have to rely on others for fossil fuels, that he was very much against fossil fuels. And here we are with gas prices through the roof. Where do you think that one particular issue, gas prices, falls in that list of what people are freaking out about right now?
high gas when you can't afford it. And a lot of people can't afford it because there's inflation. High gas means that you have to make sacrifices. You have to make choices about how you get places and where you go. And if you can't afford to drive to work anymore, if you have to take the bus and it takes you an extra 45 minutes to get to work and then you have to walk 10 blocks, it's really annoying. And it's more than just an inconvenience, because high gas prices means higher travel costs.
Yeah.
And that means that people are going to start saving money. They're not going to spend money. They're not going to go places. They're not going to go to the adorable, charming restaurant that they would in a city they had never been to if they're not traveling. They're not going to go on different websites and buy new things. People are going to contract their own personal economies, and no one likes having to do that. We like having a proliferation of choices. We like exercising those choices when we want to on our terms. And the president's saying, oh, it's going to be tough. We're going to have to tighten our belts for a little while. We're having to tighten our belts because the federal government has been so incredibly irresponsible, printing money and spending money they don't have. And I don't care what they say about lowering the deficit. When you spend $5 trillion in a pandemic and then the next year you only spend 3 trillion, that's not fiscal responsibility.
No, it's not. And that scares me as a national security matter. And part of me is like, is this ever going to change? One of the big things about politics that I think people rightly hate, is that no one seems to want to really solve any problems that require hard work and compromise. They seem to want to go after the easy stuff. Let's change the label on the bathroom door. Let's make mail-in voting whatever. Let's let Army veterans get on planes before the rest of the population. Those are not difficult issues. Those things get passed, like this. But the really tough things, immigration reform, where we're going to go with fossil fuels, are we going to rely on ourselves more for that? All of these things don't seem to get the attention. The other part of it is that each party likes it because they can fundraise off of it. If they solve the issue, poof, the fundraising kind of goes, okay, never mind. We don't need to, get freaked out. It how on target am I here, Kennedy, or am I way off the mark?
No, you're absolutely right, especially on immigration, because neither party wants to tackle immigration. They don't. It is incredibly necessary. You have a couple of different things going on at once. And the set of rules that we have that determine who gets to come into the country, there are too many of them and they are outdated. So you need to simplify the process. That means you need to prioritize who should come here, how long do people get to stay for, who should go back, who shouldn't be allowed entry, what is an asylee, how many asylees should we let into the country every year. And you have to come up that's what you're elected to do when you're in Congress. But they don't want to do that right now because they don't want to rock the boat before the midterms. Well, you've got people who are dying, leaving Latin American countries, trying to get to the U.S., sending their kids with coyotes, possibly with sexual predators, on a hideous journey. But you don't want to do anything about it because you don't want to look bad before you get not elected.
That's the thing, is they look terrible. Anyone that thinks that the status quo at the border is okay, they look like they're just either kind of cheering it on, or they absolutely don't want to come close to it in any way, shape, or form. I remember AOC down at the border during the Trump administration.
Crying.
I know, they're drinking out of toilets. Good God.
Where is she now? Where is she now? With their kids in cages. They are incarcerated. Why wasn't she talking about the baked potatoes that were stacked 10 to a room, these little kids, and foil blankets? Where is she now? Why isn't she not drafting legislation that will take this thing on one issue at a time? And, start with visas, then go to asylees, then get more judges on the border, and then make sure you have enough people processing people who are coming into the country, because the fact that you have a pendulum that goes back and forth and immigration is now at the whim of a president based on executive order. That is not law. That is not policy. All that does is create chaos. And you know who loves chaos? The cartels. And they get paid dearly for that chaos because they sell it. It's a marketing tool. So they convince poor families to give $5,000 a pop to get their kid across the border, and God help them. And let's hope that they make it alive.
Let's hope. We hear about drownings. We hear about all kinds of awful, awful things happening to the most vulnerable. And the other thing that's coming across the board, I love how people try to couch this as you have something against these people of color. I'm one of them. Okay. My family came here legally about a century ago. So I'm well embedded, yada, yada. But that's how my family got here. So I don't have anything against these people. My heart goes out to them. But there has to be process, as you said, because there's so much more harm than good being done through this. Not to mention, we haven't even touched on the drugs and the fentanyl that's pouring across the border and whatever. And this fentanyl is deadly crap. I mean, this is stuff that gets laced into marijuana or anything else and is killing a lot of people. And so, no, this isn't just about humans. This is about all the other consequences, and the fact that the cartels are just kind of laughing at us and doing what they do and making their fortunes.
They're making their fortunes and paying off politicians. So they are running Central American countries. And, all you have to do is look at some of the testimony from the El Chapo trial. It was fascinating learning the hundreds of millions of dollars that they were gifting to politicians so they would turn a blind eye, because as long as we have prohibition in this country, it's going to enrich the cartels. And, parents have to have conversations with their kids. Do not put anything in your body that you didn't buy yourself.
And even then, it's a little scary. You know what I mean? Even then, you can't, I don't know how you can really be sure that anything that you're getting is going to be safe. I don't know.
Get it from a dispensary or drink alcohol. Like
There we
that's
go.
and hopefully you don't do either one of those. Hopefully you wait a long time before you start making those decisions.
Yeah.
But God forbid you're in a situation like that. Do not put something in your body. Do not do coke. All you have to do is read about people who go to a party, they're on spring break,
Oh,
and they do a couple of lines of coke and they're either in the ICU or they die. Like
hmm.
there's no pass go.
No, they, as a friend of mine, her daughter has turned into a heroin addict, and she's been in treatment about 14 times. I mean, this ruined her life. I just hate to see that happen to people. It's so dangerous. Final thing with Kennedy. You are a strong person, strong in your beliefs, strong in your convictions, not afraid to talk about them. I love that about you. How much guff do you take? Whether it's online, do you even pay attention? Are you even aware?
Yeah, I spend most of my time on Twitter. I do post on Instagram occasionally, and it's like if people are just awful and say things just to get a reaction, I mute them. Like
Yeah,
I don't feel an obligation to entertain everyone who hate watches Fox. That's really boring to me.
yeah,
And every once in a while people will have valid comments about something, and I don't mind the strong opinions as long as you can back them up. I
yeah,
love logic, and I love the idea of being swayed to believe something else because someone has such a sound argument. And it's like I've been doing this like you. I've been doing this a long, long
yeah.
time, and it always makes me laugh when people call me a has been or something like that. I'm like, you found me on Twitter. You found me because of something I said on my show.
Yeah.
Like it's not like I found you and you last time you saw me was 1997. Like I'm still here making you angry, and that is a gift, and
Yeah.
you made my day by letting me know that.
And so for your girls, how do you have them like I'm always telling my kids about social media, likes do not define you. Followers do not define you. And you have to remember that so many of the people on these platforms who are just lashing out at you and saying really stupid, mean, crazy things, you don't know who they are. So why would you give them the power over your emotions that way? So what do you tell your girls?
Yeah, it's really really tough, and we just try and have as many conversations as possible about, you're absolutely right, and cultivating your self-worth
Yeah.
internally and not from the outside. And it's a really hard thing to do because and it starts younger and younger. And I worry about these young women that are developing body issues like dysmorphia
Yeah.
because they see people using filters, and it's
Eh,
like that's fake. That's not
mhm,
real. That is not
mhm.
real life. And, whenever we get a chance, like, I want them to be outside. I want them to feel sand in their toes and look at the ocean and know that there is something greater out there other than themselves, which is hard to believe in an era of social media. But my hope is that math is on my side. And at some point, they will see that if we just keep repeating the same affirmations, that at some point they'll go, "Oh yeah, mom was right about that." They won't let me know it now,
No, they
but at
won't.
some point, no way,
No, they
man.
won't. And my husband's like, nothing I say has an impact. And I said, not now, but somewhere in there, it's getting woven into their brains. And that's when it will have an impact. And if you think it's not, I think it is. I think kids actually do listen to their parents, even when they act like they're not. That's just
Yeah,
me, Kennedy.
and you are amazing.
Oh, gosh. Hey, great to catch up with you. We'll do it again. Keep being you. I just have great admiration for your courage on the air, off the air, anywhere that you present yourself as Kennedy to the very fortunate world.
Well, congratulations on your podcast.
Thank
You
you.
are amazing,
You
and
know
and
what?
you are one of the few people who has such a great understanding of how the world works through politics and sports. So keep doing it, and I'm a huge fan.
At the risk of making some people angry right now, we need to send your lighting people to my little studio here because
This is This is a
kind of
Fox
funny.
booth. So there are people way above my pay grade who do podcasts in the studio.
Yeah.
So this
well,
is for
you
them.
know what? I'm gonna hire one of them. Kennedy, thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Tomorrow, we've got a Kennedy cohort of sorts. Tyrus, who's just written a book, Just Tyrus, will be our guest. Hope to see you then.